Sustainability has implications across all environments. For our last session of the day, we're going to shift from an agricultural to an urban perspective on embedding sustainability. The built environment accounts for 40% of global carbon emissions, making leadership by the real estate industry imperative. We are grateful to our event sponsor and final speaker of the day, Christian Ulbrich, CEO of JLL, who, with his global sustainability team, is leading climate action to accelerate the transition to net zero. JLL is a leading real estate services company that recognizes the importance of sustainability in creating long-term value for stakeholders and creating a safe, healthy spaces for all people. Please welcome Christian Ulbrich, CEO of JLL, in conversation with Adi Ignatius, Editor-in-Chief of Harvard Business Review.
All right, I hope everything is working. Thank you all for sticking with us through the delays. I'm really pleased to be here. Really thanks to the team at NYU Stern, thanks to Tansi, and thank you, Allison, for that. You know, these are tough times. The pandemic has taken a toll on all of us. We're now sickened by the suffering that we're seeing on TV or on TikTok about what's happening in Ukraine. So, I just want to acknowledge for a moment how tough it is on everyone in business and in life, and how we're all struggling to stay on track. And, maybe we can celebrate some progress today in what's happening in pockets in terms of sustainable business and sustainable development. And so I want to speak with Christian about how JLL is looking at its role in the effort. So, Christian, if you're there, away we go.
I'm there. Good morning, everybody. Nice to be with you.
So the statistic that Allison just quoted, that real estate and infrastructure is responsible for around 40% of global carbon emissions, let's dive in right there. How is JLL moving forward, moving toward net zero emissions for itself and for its clients?
Well, it starts that you have to set yourself a very ambitious target. We did that a couple of years ago and went down on that route. We joined into the Paris Climate Agreement target, and we, for ourselves, we want to get to net zero by 2040. And the toughest way to get there is when you are participating in the SBTi net zero standard, which we signed up for and got approved last year. And so hopefully we will have our emissions, scope 1, 2, and 3 down by 2030 by 51%, and then by 2040 by 95%, and the remaining 5% we will have to offset then. Clearly, for us, the biggest challenge is not our own emissions. In a services business, that is relatively easy to deal with it. It's the scope 3 emissions, the emissions of our clients, which are making up more than 96% of our emissions we will be responsible for, are sitting in the footprint of the properties from our clients, which we manage. And so that is where we have to work on and help them to make progress on their own footprint. Most of our clients are totally on board. And so we have seen some great progress. We had one of the largest financial institutions. We were able to take their emissions down by 50%, which usually starts off that you bring them on renewable energies. That's kind of the biggest win at the beginning. But we also reduced their water consumption by 50%. And so these early years are super important because we can really deal with the low-hanging fruits.
So a lot of us are still trying to rethink, do we come back physically to the office? If so, how frequently? How might the decision that we all make on this impact sustainability goals and the footprint of the built environment?
Well, that's a really good question, and it's one which still has to be answered, because the implications of hybrid working will be just widespread, and how it really plays out will take some years to analyze. I mean, as long as, for example, in the winter times, you heat an office building and you heat your home, you literally have potentially more emissions, because some people work from home, some people work in the office, and the office is not gone. And so this is not a straightforward situation where you think when people are not commuting back and forth that we have a reduction on our carbon footprint. Not necessarily. It may even mean that you have an increase on your carbon footprint. There are so many different factors which you have to consider here that there is unfortunately not a clear answer. The only clear answer which we can already see is that companies are significantly beefing up on their efforts to create an office environment which is highly attractive for people to come back. And that is an investment they are taking, which will include sustainability, but still whether that creates overall an improvement, that hybrid work environment from a carbon footprint is still to be analyzed.
Given your position, I'd love your thoughts. It's a little bit off track, but I'd love your thoughts on, so how do we use the office as a tool, as a place people want to or need to go to, rather than just it's where we always have gone to work?
Can you still hear me?
Now I can.
Oh, okay. I don't know. I'm sorry for that. If you just go to work to do some quiet work at your desk, there's no need to actually do so. And so there has to be more to it than just that. And it's mostly that you want to engage with your colleagues, you want to experience the brand, you want to be creative. And that is the type of environment companies have to provide in their offices to make it attractive. And so the concept of hybrid work will probably lead to something where if you have to do some quiet work for yourself, you can stay home, no need to come to the office. But if you want to engage with your partners at work, with your clients, if you need to brainstorm in a group, and those type of things will happen in the office, but then the office will look very different. It will not be just a series of workplaces. It will be some workplaces, but mostly it will be space where you can interact with your colleagues and where you can really live and breathe the purpose of the company you work for.
So when you think about sustainability issues, are you just looking at climate, or are there other issues that you're trying to tackle that would fit under the rubric of sustainability?
Yeah, as you know, sustainability is a big word which sums up a lot of different topics. And sure, we are looking at many aspects of it. What is at the moment obviously very top of the list is the whole topic of the health and well-being of people. And you can have a lot of aspects included into your built environment. There is this new certificate out there, which is called the WELL certificate. And so we are trying to get to our clients more and more the belief that they should invest into space so that they can certify that they provide well offices to their employees. And this is particularly critical in some cities where you have high levels of pollution, where it's fantastic if you can provide them an office environment where they have super clean air, super clean water, and all the ingredients which will make them feel comfortable in that environment and obviously very safe. The other aspect, which is very, very important for most of our clients and for ourselves, is the whole DEI topic. And so creating an inclusive environment is very important, but it also goes into very kind of financial aspects, the whole topic of focusing on diverse suppliers. I mean, we do a lot of supplies to our clients, so we have a large procurement department, and just last year we spent more than 1.7 billion on behalf of our clients to diverse suppliers, and that is something where we work on, but we also help our clients to increase that part. And then just create a built environment which is more human-centric and which is sitting better in the local neighborhood. what always strikes me that you sometimes see brilliant buildings, but you have to walk upstairs. They are slightly elevated. You have security controls on the outside already, and they sit like a monolith in a neighborhood, and they are not inclusive at all. And that is not the way you should position your company in the future. And therefore, that is not the way you should position your office space in the future.
So let's go now to, back to the theme of the conference, which is, about the business case for sustainability. So, let me put that to you. What is the business case for your focus on mainstreaming sustainability? And if you have, specific examples of how you've created financial value through sustainability, for yourself or for your clients, it'd be great to hear.
Well, there are various aspects, Adi. I mean, first of all, when you think about that, one of the most challenging topics for pretty much all companies at the moment is to attract and retain top talent. You have to do much more than offer them a high-paid job. They need to be able to identify with the purpose of the company. And in our case, we have defined a purpose a couple of years ago, shaping the future of real estate for a better world, where that element of sustainability is obviously a core theme to it. And you have to kind of live and breathe that in a very credible way. And that's what we are trying to do. And we know that when we are asking new hires what attracted them to JLL, very many are raising that topic of our purpose, what attracted them to them. And then they kind of try to inform themselves whether that is just a sentence, which we are stating, or whether there's real evidence that this is the way this company is being kind of operating. And that then goes also into very financial KPIs. Not only that, when you're in a professional services environment, if you are not able to attract new people, you cannot grow, because any growth is related to more people. We have hired, just in the last 12 months, we have grown our workforce by more than 8,000 people. And that shows you how important that is for our financial success. But you can also come down to carbon taxes. I mean, you have now more and more countries which release carbon taxes. And if you're reducing your carbon footprint, you are literally saving money and have an immediate financial return with regards to that. But I think, again, moving to our clients, we have two large sets of clients group. Those are the investor clients who professionally invest into real estate, and then obviously the large occupiers who occupy those buildings. When you look at those investor clients, they are undergoing at the moment a massive change, because with that taxonomy, which you can see in the European Union, it becomes harder and harder for them if their buildings are not on a roadmap for sustainability and for reducing the carbon footprint. You don't get finance anymore. And if you don't get finance, it becomes very expensive, because you have to put a lot of equity into those buildings. And usually it will be very difficult to sell those buildings. And so it becomes very imminent for them to deal with that question: how can they reduce the carbon footprint of those buildings? Because otherwise their business case is falling apart. And if you go to those occupiers, many occupiers have a much, much bigger task to reduce their carbon footprint than just the professional services companies like us. And so they have to look at which are the easy parts where we can get on our journey, and which are the tougher parts. And frankly, real estate is one of the easier parts. There are buildings out there which are net zero, and there are ways to massively reduce the carbon footprint of existing buildings. So why wouldn't you go for those low-hanging fruits immediately? Which means that they are willing to pay a higher rent for those type of buildings than for the other buildings, or to a degree, they will not move into buildings which are not providing them with a low carbon footprint.
So I want to break that down a little bit. So, I mean, at this stage, is most sustainable development, is it mission driven, by companies like you, because, your employees, your stakeholders want it, or is it demand driven? I can't tell if what you described is a a minority of buyers, or if it's becoming mainstream?
I think it's now becoming really mainstream. It was maybe a couple of years ago mission-driven. When we started to deal with it, it was probably more mission-driven, but now it's clearly becoming demand-driven. 80% of leading investors considering climate risk and the resiliency during acquisitions and development of buildings as absolutely critical. And you see that is now a number where we would all agree this is now demand-driven. And the majority of the Fortune 500 companies, which are the large occupiers, have all signed up to net zero carbon targets, whether it's 2035 to 2050, somewhere in between, they're all sitting. And again, that shows that it is now demand-driven. What some of the challenges is, depending on which business you are in, your core business is very difficult to kind of take it down to net zero. If you're an airline, it's not an easy journey. So again, they focus on that journey, on those areas which are low-hanging fruits, and the built environment, at least from an operating perspective, is one of those low-hanging fruits.
So let's talk, in more detail about finance for a second. So last year, JLL renewed its, I think it was $2.75 billion credit facility and linked it for the first time to sustainability targets. Sustainability-linked loans and bonds are growing in popularity. Can you talk about how this works and why you decided to update your credit facility in this way last year?
Yeah, obviously, this is now an opportunity to kind of combine two things: sending a very strong message to the market, to the street, and to your clients, but also save a little bit. I mean, the difference between green bonds and green facilities versus non-green facilities is still relatively small. It sits somewhere between 5 and 10 bips, but on a large sum of money, it makes a difference. You can use that saved money for further investment into reducing your carbon footprint. But as I said, it's becoming now much more a journey where if you are not delivering on those targets, that it becomes harder and harder for you to get financing and also to get the right shareholders into your company. We have a couple of shareholders who explicitly are focused on companies who are very advanced on that sustainability journey. And usually those are the shareholders who are in it for the long run and therefore very attractive shareholders to us. What we also found out, and that is a survey which we did in 2020, we conducted a research in central London on buildings which have the certificate BREEAM Outstanding. BREEAM is the UK certificate, and Outstanding, obviously, the top. And we could prove that the rent of BREEAM Outstanding certified buildings, the rent premium is between 4 and 11%. And new developments who are BREEAM Outstanding are 100% pre-leased before they come to market versus only 50% of standard properties. So this is very clear value, financial value, which you can deliver when you are following that journey.
So, it's going to take a large amount of investment to move the built environment away from fossil fuels toward more efficient systems. Overall, where do you see that investment coming from? And, do you feel like it can come quickly enough?
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, obviously, you only about 1% of the built environment is renewed per year. So on that case, it would take 100 years. And so we don't have that much time. So what you see is, again, there are low-hanging fruits. I'm going back to green energy. That obviously helps massively. So you will see a lot of investment outside of the immediate real estate industry with just much more capacity for green energy, which then can be bought by building owners and occupiers so that they reduce their carbon footprint. But that is kind of changing the existing usage of power, for example, into green power, much better. That's step number one. But then you have to continue to just reduce the amount of power you need for building. And there are a lot of technical ways of doing so. For example, we bought into a company called Henk, and they have developed a motor for ventilation and air conditioning systems, which usually, depending on what you have before, takes between 20 and 40% less power in running those ventilation and air conditioning systems. And that's kind of obviously the best energy is the energy which you don't need at all. And so we have invested into kind of those type of hardware companies, but we also have invested into a couple of software companies who are just able, which is smarter management of your technology in the building, that you need less power. And then there are obviously the ways that you are digging into or touching the construction of a building, but that usually becomes very, very expensive. And that is the piece which will take long. And in some cases, it's probably better you take the whole building down and develop a new building, which is green. But then we are running into the issue between inbuilt kind of carbon and operating carbon. It's easy to get the operating carbon down to zero with a brand new building, but that means you have to build that building, and there's a lot of embedded carbon then in that new building. And so that is something where we will need much more science now to help us to find the right kind of decision between the two, whether you deal with an existing building and bring the carbon down, or whether you kind of demolish that building and develop a new one.
And talk about what you're seeing in terms of, building owners and managers. Are they willing? Let's assume the money is available. Are they willing to invest in expensive retrofits?
Well, it depends. I mean, they obviously all want a financial case, but the financial case can also be a protection against a massive downright. So if you cannot kind of lease a building anymore, unless you invest heavily into the sustainability of that building, it becomes a financial play. And you have now some investors who have kind of raised equity deliberately to turn existing buildings, which are pretty bad on the carbon side, into good buildings going forward. And they specialize on those type of retrofits. So, that's the beauty of a free market. There are always people who come up with great ideas and who can develop a business case out of it. But you also have those who are saying, we just squeeze the lemon to the last drop and we cannot invest into that building, and we just leave it as it is and lower the rent. There will be somebody who is willing to be in a dirty building if the rent is low enough. So you have the whole spectrum, but we shouldn't underestimate regulation is coming into play here. And when you just look at the regulation New York City has passed, that is very, very rigorous. And the carbon taxes will make it eventually impossible for people not to retrofit their buildings.
Talk a little bit more about the regulatory environment. Are there other changes pending, or that you would like to see that could move the needle significantly in all of this?
Well, I think that the carbon tax is a very effective way of nudging kind of the world into a certain direction. Now, you have to be careful that you're not overdoing it, because in many countries, the capacity for works is just at its limit. You can't get any company in who is able to deliver any kind of construction work to do those retrofits. But clearly, I believe we will see that carbon tax becoming a very popular instrument around the world, and it will probably only grow into one direction. Hopefully that the current geopolitical crisis we are facing is not taking us too much backwards, because at the moment there's a risk that we are moving away from the sustainability aspect, because people are more worried about peace in the world.
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, to what extent does what's happening in Ukraine affect the sustainability equation, either directly or indirectly? How are you sort of calculating the effect.
Again, we can only speculate, but there is clearly a risk that when people have the choice between sitting in the cold and in the dark, that there's a kind of a new popularity for fossil fuels coming up. And so I expect that we are at risk to go backwards for a couple of years, which would be really, really a shame. But clearly, I appreciate that at the moment that topic is much more important, that we get peace back into the world. But it will take time. I mean, at some point, the current energy crisis will obviously put even more focus on building up renewable energies and other ways of getting to heat and power into a building. But again, the capacity is limited and we cannot change everything overnight. So as I said, I think we will go for a couple of years backwards, and then we will probably accelerate at a very, very high speed on that journey towards more renewable energies and more sustainable forms of heating and powering a building.
Yeah, well, let's hope we get through this quickly and as best we can. It's really important that companies like yours are making this commitment. That's how to move the needle. So. Christian, thank you very much for this conversation, for all you do. And I think at this point, I'm going to hand it back to the session host, to Allison.
Thank you, Adi.
Thank you so much, Christian and Adi.